Hello, punsters! I'm just kidding, we don't actually use that phrase around here. Today we'll be having a look at Summoner Wars 2nd Edition Master Set, a game that is old, clunky, and also very good. It is literally a blast from the past. And now that I used the title of the video in the words of the video, I can die happy. Talking of bucket lists, Summoner Wars is a game that people love to love, which is embarrassing for me as a board game reviewer because before this remaster, I have never even played it. Originally published 47 years ago in 2009, this faux collectible card game felt dated setting-wise and concept-wise even back then. You've got decks of cards, you play goblins or dwarves or whatever, and you fight each other with those decks of cards, of goblins or dwarves or whatever. Riveting stuff. If I had a penny for every time one of my board gaming friends eulogized the virtues of Summoner Wars, I would probably have like 7 pennies. I don't have a lot of friends, but I can attest that the good word of Summoner Wars traveled far past its tired trappings. And yet I resisted playing it. Summoner Wars 2nd Edition comes with 6 pre-packaged playable decks. Unlike CCGs of yore, the deck building isn't central to the experience. Most people will just pick a deck, find a friend, and meet them on the field of battle. And by field, I mean a cardboard board split into an 8x6 grid of rectangles with what is a nearly plain parchment texture printed on it. Exciting if you like parchment. I'm sorry, I have to do this to keep myself awake. And if you made it this far, congratulations. You survived the boring stuff and now strap yourself in tight because the rest of Summoner Wars is a wild and exuberant ride. A greatest hits of a genre I thought I was long past caring about that reminded me how great and joyous an old banger can be. Around 47 years ago, I used to organize Magic the Gathering tournaments at a friendly local gaming store, and whenever anyone new asked me to describe what Magic was, I had the perfect answer. I would say it is a 50-50 blend of poker and chess, with a near infinite pool of pieces, which are also cards. Summoner Wars leans into the chess side of Magic, which is a good thing, and I say that as someone who dislikes chess immensely. When you start the game, you'll immediately deploy a summoning gate, 2 starting units, and your summoner. Things are already getting interesting. Your summoner is undeniably your best unit, and also you don't even have to do anything to play it. You start with it on the board, for free. It's kind of like if you opened a bank account and got £1,000 just for the privilege. Sounds amazing until you realize it's only been 2 hours and you've already spent all your free money on, I don't know, artisan pirate hats on Etsy. Not that I would ever do that. Your summoner generally starts with a decent chunk of health, but the wrinkle is that your summoner's health is also your health. Once your summoner dies, you lose. Kill your opponent's summoner, you win. Aha, you'll say, I'll just barricade my summoner behind an impenetrable line of units and structures. That's fine, but your summoner's powers and abilities rely on you getting up close and personal, right towards the central line of the board where the action is happening. And the problem with that is that once your units do get there, they become vulnerable to the ceaseless trading of killing blows. Rather than being the Queen's Gambit, this game opts for the more straightforward, but no less exciting, King's Gambit. And that is just the surface level of Summoner Wars, and I bet I already wetted your whistle. But to wet even further, I have to explain the rules. The good news here is that this is perhaps the simplest rule set in any collectible card game out there. And better yet, it doesn't make it any less mechanically robust than the others. Hello and welcome to the Teach Zone, a zone beyond time and space where your soul has been forever imprisoned to suffer board game rules. In the Teach Zone, all rules will be taught whether you like it or not. Also, I wear this hat because I don't really know what to do with it anymore. In Summoner Wars, you'll pick out a deck and get your summoner, starting gate, and 2 starting units, and distribute them onto the board as instructed by the back of your summoner card. Shuffle your deck draw 5 cards, get 2 or 3 magic depending on whether you're first or second, and that's it. You can begin. When it's your turn, you will follow these 6 precise steps. First, you can summon units. Pay their cost in magic, put them down orthogonally adjacent to a summoning gate. Done. Then you move. You can move up to 3 of your units, 1 or 2 spaces orthogonally, but not through other cards. Done. Then you can build structures. You can build them in the first 3 rows or orthogonally adjacent to your summoner by paying their cost in magic. Done. Then you attack. Up to 3 of your units can attack. If they are melee, they can attack enemy cards next to them. If they're ranged, they can attack up to 3 spaces away in a straight, unobstructed line. You check your unit's strength and roll that many dice. If they're melee units, they score hits equal to swords rolled. If they are ranged units, they score hits equal to bows. Anytime your card takes out an enemy card, you get 1 magic. Done. Then you discard any number of cards from your hand. For each card you discard, you get 1 magic. Done. Finally, you draw back up to 5 cards. Additionally, you will have events, and you can play them on one of the phases during your turn depending on what the event says. And if they are the type to stick around, they will be discarded at the very first moment of your next turn. And that's it. That is literally all of the rules, which means your time in the teach zone is now over. Go on, be free. Until next time. Done. Now, I bet you absorbed all of that perfectly and could recite it back verbatim. But just in case you haven't, let's go over some of these again and see what makes them ha ha ha. Like many collectible card games of its era, Summoner Wars adopted the extra layer of positionality. But unlike many collectible card games of the era, it didn't just staple positionality like a misguided attempt at adding an extra layer to an onion. It extracts maximum flavor and blends everything into a perfect melange, just like French onion soup. To illustrate, and also to make you forget about my tortured analogies, let's take a look at an example. This is Takulu. She's the summoner of the Breakers faction, and her ability is 100% Chef Kiss. When she performs an attack against an enemy unit, instead of removing any health and killing it, she can turn it 180 degrees and hey, your goblin is now my goblin. That sounds great, but to utilize Takulu's ability, you have to be able to attack. And remember, to attack with a ranged unit, your target has to be within 3 spaces and in an uninterrupted line. Not a problem, I'll just move Takulu here and then she can shoot. What can go wrong? Here's a clever thing. Anytime you move a ranged unit into a position where it can attack an enemy, you immediately become vulnerable to that same unit attacking you back, regardless of whether it's ranged or melee, since they can easily close the 2-space gap. Not an issue if you actually kill the enemy unit, but remember, most units are chunky and dice aren't exactly known for reliable results. Whilst there's a pretty good chance that any rolled dice will produce a hit, it's not a guarantee. The dice in Summoner Wars are what I call a sprinkle wrinkle, a dash, a pinch, a soupçon of unpredictability that keeps everyone on their toes. In this example, Takulu is about to blast her mind rays into a sad goblin that's on 1 hit point. If she succeeds, not only is the goblin no longer a threat, but also it can literally turn around and hit the goblin summoner. I believe the professional term for this is a buy one, get one free. But let's see what happens when I roll the dice. Okay, so the sad goblin is still alive, but maybe that's not the worst. It is. Not only is that little dweeb that had no right to exist for as long as it did still around, but also it can close in and potentially hit my summoner for 1/4 of her health. But maybe the dice will be on my side this time. If you're a purist and prefer your French onion soup as a predictable, deterministic system, then this card game isn't going to be for you. I, however, don't mind a bit of cheese. Summoner Wars is a card game that says, think carefully about your moves because you're on an actual battlefield and every shove of a card opens up a new smorgasbord of avenues that can lead to riches and or ruin. But no matter how hard you think, things might just not go your way. This makes Summoner Wars a more forgiving game, a more relaxed affair, but it never makes it wonky. Instead, you have to factor in unpredictability into your considerations. And the swings are never so wild as to make you annoyed. And on the off chance they do, well, that's a moment of real theatrics that breaks up the monotony of the head-to-head battle. Let's take a look at another example of a summoner, the universe's main villain, Ret Talus. And yes, that does mean that there's Summoner Wars lore. And yes, it is exactly as bad and corny as you would think. Ret Talus, unlike other summoners, does not need to get up close and personal to effectively utilize his ability. Instead, at the measly cost of his own health, he can summon back units that have been either destroyed by your opponent or that you've dumped into the bin to get some mana. I mean magic. Those two are definitely not the same. Upshot, you don't need to risk Ret Talus to do cool things. Downshot, you need to shoot yourself in the foot, thereby risking Ret Talus to do cool things. I mean, why let your opponent destroy you so they can win the game when you can destroy yourself to let your opponent win the game? Magic players would probably chime in and say, life is but a resource, and using it to power cool stuff isn't exactly new to card games. But what I really like here are once again the positional implications. Nothing stops you from squirreling him away into the furthest corner of the board. More so, nothing stops you from surrounding him with defensive units and structures. But then you realize that not only have you effectively stopped his ability from functioning, because he can only summon units adjacent to himself, but also anything you would summon would be so far away from the enemy that it would take ages for the units you've summoned to do anything. And when you realize that, you also realize that the answer might be, just like with all the other summoners, to take this squishy precious uber villain that leaks hit points like a skeleton summoning watering can and shove him right into the center of the board where he'll become a pincushion for all your enemies' swords and bows. I think this best illustrates the tone of Summoner Wars. It's a swingy ride with cool abilities that don't function exactly as you'd expect. Each card is useful not only in different situations, but also in different applications. You're never bound to a single strategy, just like you're never bound to a single position on the field. It's less of a question of what will you use and more of a question of how you will use it. There are no big plays in Summoner Wars. Most units are much of a muchness. They all do something cool even, but there's rarely a moment of, oh my god, I can't believe you drew that card. And because your turn is always your turn, with no interruptions from the opponent, the focus of this card game shifts from bluffing and working out the odds to careful considerations and ponderings. This really is chess the card game because each of your turns is a puzzle, a proposition, and if you just had enough time to look at all of it, you'll probably work out something clever. Yet the pace of Summoner Wars never lets up. The tone of the artwork, the zany abilities, the dice, they all lead you to a room with one giant button on the wall that says, press me and see what happens. That's cool, right? It is. And as the cherry on top, let me show you one final thing. Entropy, the inescapable death spiral of all things. You, me, umbrellas, Coventry, black holes, galaxies, all will perish in time. And so will a deck of cards. Unlike in other card games where you get to reshuffle your deck once you've drawn the final card, in Summoner Wars, drawing the last one really is the end. This is unusually cruel, but also very fun, mostly because it is a bed you've made yourself. If you've run out of drawables, that means that the units you have remaining on the board will not only have to defend your summoner, they'll also have to destroy the opposing one. Putting yet another wrinkle into the situation is that in each deck there will be a couple of units that are slightly better than your average bear, but they cost a lot of magic, and magic is a scarce resource. If you think back to your time in the Teach Zone, you will remember that the two ways of getting magic are your cards destroying an opposing card or you discarding cards at the end of your turn and getting one magic for each one that you discard. So if you really want to have a big one, you can, but what will it cost you? Summoner Wars is a game of ebb and flow. One moment you might dominate the board, but since you can only move 3 things and attack at most with 3 things in a given turn, the overwhelming presence doesn't offer the strategic advantage you think it will. So unless the chunky wonky you just summoned is going to win you the game there and then, was it really worth the 6 units that you discarded into the bin? What are you going to do in the late game? And no, chew your nails is not an applicable answer. You can do deck building if you want to. There are rules for it. It's just that, to me, Summoner Wars is at its finest when you just break out 2 pre-constructed decks and pit them against each other. And I think that will probably answer the question whether Summoner Wars is a game for you. If you've never liked collectible card games, sure, the tone here is slightly different, but it still features all of the trappings of the genre, and you probably won't find much here to sway you. If, on the other hand, you play collectible card games a lot, then this game is also not for you. Maybe it is well suited to competitions. I don't know. I frankly don't want to know, because I don't think that's where this game's strengths lie. But if you ever found yourself buying a Magic the Gathering intro deck and thinking, these cards are a bit rubbish, I wish I could have more fun with them with my friends, then Summoner Wars is definitely for you. Except, of course, I've just got very clean definitions, and in reality, life is a little murkier. And if that still doesn't make you sure whether this box is for you, my recommendation is to try the free demo on the official online client. You can play the Goblins deck versus the Breakers deck on your browser for free. It'll teach you the rules, it's really well implemented and accessible on all devices. There is a paid version where you get access to all 6 decks and potentially more as they come out, but you don't need that to figure out whether you'll enjoy it. If I had one actual criticism of Summoner Wars, apart from the fact that in 2021 it feels a little tired, is how this box is titled. When I see the words Master Set in the title, I expect an actual Master Set, a collection of cards that's vast and digs through the game's history. This feels more like a core set. You get 6 factions, you get to try the game out, and then more are on the way. And frankly, the size of the box is egregious. If you take out the board, there is easily enough space to fit like 8 onions in here, along with your dice and cards. Which means it's time for this onion to say goodbye. If you enjoyed this video, there's more that we've done, and they will be appearing somewhere over here at the end of the credits. We did a video on Kanban, and that was, I think, a pretty good one. And also, our next video is a big one. The whole shebang. But what if you miss our next video? Well, I've discovered something that I've never heard about before, and I don't think many people know about it. But there's this button underneath called subscribe, and if you click that, our videos will magically appear in your feed. Amazing, I know. Anywho, I'll leave you to figure that out for yourselves. Bye bye.